The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. Out on the edge of a forgotten town, the giant cowboy sat alone in his old wooden house. People in town barely spoke to him. Some were scared of his size, others simply didn't understand him. So he lived in silence, working his land, fixing fences, and talking only to his horses. Most nights were the same, but not this one. It began with a soft noise. A quick, sharp sound that cut through the stillness. The cowboy lifted his head. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was something else, something human. He set down his cup, stood up slowly, and walked outside. The moonlight spilled over the barn, pale and cold. Again he heard it, rustling, faint but real. Someone was inside. He moved carefully, not wanting to scare whatever was out there. His boots pressed into the dirt, each step steady and slow. When he reached the barn door, he paused. There was breathing on the other side, fast, uneven breathing. Someone was afraid. He opened the door just enough to step inside. The barn smelled of hay and worn wood. At first he saw nothing unusual, but then in a dark corner something shifted. A small figure tried to sink deeper into the shadows. He narrowed his eyes. It wasn't a thief. It wasn't a stranger looking to cause harm. It was a girl who looked exhausted, filthy from travel, and terrified. She flinched when she realized he had spotted her. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely keep them still. Her eyes held a kind of fear he recognized too well, the fear of someone who had been running for far too long. "Please, don't make me leave," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry wood. She tried to pull straw over herself as if that could hide her from the world. The cowboy didn't speak yet. He didn't move closer. He just stood there studying her. There were marks on her arms, old bruises and new ones. Her clothes were torn, her shoes almost falling apart. She had nothing but the fear she carried with her. For the first time in years, the giant cowboy felt something stir inside him, something protective, something heavy and unspoken. Someone had come to his barn, not by accident, but out of desperation, and he couldn't ignore that. The girl stayed pressed against the corner, as if the wooden wall behind her was the only thing holding her up. Her breathing was shaky and shallow, the kind that came from days of fear and no real rest. The giant cowboy didn't rush toward her. He knew enough about scared animals and scared people to understand that sudden movements only made things worse. So he stayed where he was, letting the silence stretch, giving her time to understand he wasn't angry, and he wasn't about to drag her out into the night. When she realized he wasn't shouting or reaching for her, she finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, swollen, and tired in a way no young person's eyes should ever be. She opened her mouth as if to explain, but no words came out, just a small, broken sound. The cowboy waited. He didn't pressure her. She deserved the chance to speak on her own terms. After a long moment, she swallowed hard and forced out a whisper. "I'm not here to steal anything, I swear. I needed a place to hide." Her voice trembled so much the words barely held together. She looked like she expected him to grab her at any second, maybe throw her outside or haul her straight to the sheriff's office. But he still didn't move. He kept his deep, steady gaze on her, silent but attentive. It was the first safety she had felt in days, even if she didn't trust it yet. Her hands tightened around a small torn cloth bag she'd dragged in with her. It was empty. No food, no water, nothing useful. Just a reminder of how long she had been running. She wiped her face with her sleeve, trying to look braver than she felt, but the dirt and fear on her skin made the gesture look even more fragile. "I left them," she said suddenly, the words spilling out in a rush as if they had been locked in her throat for days. "I couldn't stay. They were hurting me, not just yelling, worse. And when I tried to leave before, they dragged me back. This time I ran and I didn't stop. I thought I could get far away, but—" her voice shook and broke. She squeezed her eyes shut. "They're looking for me. They always look." The cowboy's jaw tightened a little, the only sign of emotion he allowed to show. He didn't interrupt her, even when her voice cracked. He knew pain when he heard it. Knew the way a person talked when they were holding themselves together by a thread. The barn door rattled softly in the wind, and she jumped, pressing herself tighter into the corner. "They'll find me," she whispered. "They always do. I didn't mean to come here. I didn't know anybody lived this far out. I saw the barn and I thought maybe I could hide until morning. I'm sorry." She dropped her gaze to the dirt floor, ready for him to shout or demand she leave. But instead of shouting, the cowboy did something small, quiet, and surprising. He took one slow step back, giving her even more space. She blinked, confused. Most people moved toward her in anger. Nobody moved away to make her feel safer. She stared at him with a mixture of disbelief and caution. You're not mad?" she asked. He shook his head once. Calm. Gentle. The kind of answer someone gives when speaking isn't necessary. It made her shoulders drop just a little, as if the weight she carried had shifted but not disappeared. "They'll be looking for me," she continued, her words tumbling out again. "They might come here and ask questions. They lie. They make themselves look good and they make me look bad. They'll say things that aren't true. They always do that. People believe them because they talk loud and act important." She paused, trying to control her breathing. "I don't want to get you in trouble. I'll leave. I only needed a little rest." She pushed herself up from the floor, but her legs were too weak. She stumbled forward and grabbed a beam to keep from collapsing. The cowboy took a small step, ready to catch her if she fell, but he stopped when she froze in fear. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Her legs finally held, but barely. "You haven't eaten in a while," he said, his deep voice breaking the heavy silence for the first time. She jolted at the sound, steady, low, calm. He spoke the way someone speaks to a frightened horse, gentle but firm. "You're not going anywhere like that." She opened her mouth to argue, but her stomach growled so loudly that it answered for her. She looked embarrassed, too drained to hide it. He didn't laugh. He didn't comment. He simply turned toward the barn door and said, "You can stay long enough to get your strength back." The girl hesitated. Every instinct told her to run before trouble arrived. But she had no strength left, no plan, nowhere to turn. She clutched the beam and watched him, waiting for a trick, waiting for anger, waiting for something to change. But he only walked a few steps toward the house. Then he stopped and looked over his shoulder at her. His eyes weren't cold and they weren't suspicious. They were tired, patient, and strangely kind. "You're safe for now," he said softly. Those 4 words hit her harder than any blow she had taken in the place she escaped from. Safe. The word felt impossible. She wasn't sure she believed it yet. But for the first time since she ran, she felt her heartbeat slowing just a little. She took a shaky breath, holding on to that small thread of hope, thin, fragile, but real enough to keep her standing. The cowboy didn't look back at first. He walked toward the small house beside the barn with the slow, steady steps of a man who had lived many years carrying heavy things, some of them not seen by the eye. The girl stayed where she was, still gripping the wooden beam, unsure if she should follow him or stay hidden. Her mind kept repeating fears she couldn't silence. What if he changed his mind? What if he was angry later? What if he planned to call the people chasing her? She had met men like that before, kind for a moment, cruel the next. She had learned to trust nobody. Trust was a door that, once opened, always led to another wound. Yet this cowboy didn't fit into any pattern she recognized. He didn't talk much. He didn't rush her. He didn't look at her the way dangerous men often did. He looked at her like she was human, even if she struggled to believe she still was. He stopped in the doorway of the house and waited. No words, just stood there, leaving the decision to her. She took a step forward, then another. Each movement felt uncertain, like she was walking through water. When she reached him, she kept her head lowered, expecting judgment, command, something sharp. But nothing came. He only opened the door wider. Inside, the house was simple. A small table, a stove that crackled with low fire, shelves lined with tools and old books. It wasn't messy, but it wasn't neat either. It felt lived in but lonely. The kind of place where silence made itself comfortable. He went to the stove and grabbed a pot, filling it with water. She stayed near the doorway, too unsure to step farther inside. Her eyes scanned the room quickly. Windows with curtains always half closed, boots by the door, a jacket hanging on a hook. Every detail made her more aware of how out of place she looked, standing barefoot with dirt on her face and fear in her posture. "You can sit," he said without turning around. She hesitated, then sat at the edge of a chair like she might need to flee at any moment. Her hands twisted together in her lap. She kept glancing at the windows, expecting faces to appear in the dark. The cowboy worked quietly. He chopped vegetables, the knife hitting the cutting board with steady rhythm. The familiar sound comforted her more than she expected. Normal people cooked. Normal people didn't hunt runaway girls in the middle of the night. "You live out here alone?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Been that way a long time." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. She wanted to take it back, but he didn't seem bothered. "People talk too much in town," he said. "Talk about things they don't know. Talk about who they don't understand." He glanced at her. "I like quiet." She lowered her eyes again. She knew what it felt like to be misunderstood, misjudged. She knew the sting of people looking at her as if she didn't belong. She wondered what they said about him. A giant of a man with silent eyes and a shadow that could swallow a doorway. Maybe they feared him for the same reason she feared the dark, because they never bothered to understand what lived inside it. "Did you lose someone?" she asked, cautious. He didn't answer right away. He stirred the pot, the steam rising slowly. For a moment she thought he wouldn't respond. "My family's gone," he said finally. "Long time now." She felt a strange pull in her chest. She didn't know his story, but she understood loss. She understood the kind of emptiness that followed a person everywhere like an invisible companion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged a little, but not in a cold way. More like a man who had accepted his pain long ago. A man who had grown around the hurt, even if the hurt never left him. The smell of warm food filled the room and her stomach tightened again, loud enough to break the silence. She flushed with embarrassment. The cowboy didn't comment. He set a bowl in front of her. She stared at it for a long moment before picking up the spoon. "Thank you," she said, her voice unsteady. "Eat slow," he replied. "You ain't had real food in a while." She obeyed, each bite slow and careful. Warmth spread through her chest with every swallow. She didn't realize how cold she had been until the food began to ease the shaking in her hands. As she ate, she watched him. Everything about the cowboy was big, his hands, his height, his boots, but his movements were quiet, almost gentle, like he knew how to control his strength, like he had learned to use his size as protection, not intimidation. She wondered if he had always been this silent, or if grief had carved the words out of him. Maybe loneliness had settled into his bones so deeply that speaking felt unnecessary. But he wasn't unkind. There was no harshness in him, just heaviness. "People who are chasing you," he said suddenly. "Who are they?" Her hand froze halfway to her mouth. Fear rushed back into her eyes. "I can't go back," she whispered. "They don't let anyone leave. They say it's for our own good, but it's not. They hurt people who fight back." She set down her spoon. "I fought back once." "How many?" he asked. "A group," she said. "They act like they own me. They always say they know what's best, but they only know control." He leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. "They hit you?" She nodded, tears threatening again. "They hit, they starve, they take everything. And if you run, they come after you. I thought maybe if I got far enough away, they'd stop. But," she closed her eyes. "They don't stop." The cowboy didn't flinch. He didn't look shocked. He didn't offer empty sympathy. Instead, his face grew harder in a quiet, controlled way. Not angry at her, but angry on her behalf. "You ain't going back," he said, voice firm. She stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. People promise protection all the time, but they never stood by it. "You don't even know me," she whispered. He met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Don't need to," he said. "I know what it looks like when someone's been treated wrong, and I know you ain't safe out there alone." His words settled over her like a blanket she wasn't ready to accept. Warm, heavy, and comforting in a way she had forgotten existed. For the first time since she ran, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like property. She didn't feel hunted in this exact moment. She felt seen. The girl had barely finished her bowl when a distant sound cut through the quiet room. Hoofbeats. Slow at first, then sharper, more deliberate. The cowboy's head lifted. He knew the rhythm of horses the way other men knew the rhythm of rain. This wasn't a neighbor. This wasn't a wanderer passing by. This was someone coming with purpose. The girl froze, spoon suspended in midair. All the color drained from her face. She recognized danger faster than the cowboy could speak it. Her body tensed like a wild animal cornered in the woods. The cowboy didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and blew out the lamp, leaving only the faint glow from the stove. Shadows swallowed the walls. The girl instinctively pushed herself back in her chair, breathing quick and shallow. "Go to the back room," he said quietly. She shook her head. "They'll find me. They always find me. I shouldn't have come here." "I shouldn't back room," he repeated, firmer this time. Something in his tone, calm but unshakably solid, cut through her panic. She stood on trembling legs and hurried toward the small room behind the kitchen. Before she disappeared inside, she turned to him, eyes wide with fear. "Please don't let them take me," she whispered. He didn't answer with words. He simply nodded, a promise in silence. She slipped into the room and closed the door, leaving only a sliver of light under it. The cowboy turned toward the main door just as heavy boots hit the porch. Someone knocked. Hard. He opened the door slowly, filling the doorway with his massive frame. Out on the dark porch stood Sheriff Lomer, a wide man with a weathered face and eyes that always looked like they were searching for trouble to blame on someone else. 2 deputies sat on their horses behind him, scanning the property with cold interest. The sheriff gave the cowboy a practiced smile, the kind meant to look friendly but didn't reach anywhere near the eyes. "Even in," the sheriff said, adjusting his belt. "Sorry to drop in unannounced, but we're looking for someone. A runaway girl, young, dirty clothes, might be scared. You seen anyone around?" The cowboy's jaw flexed. His eyes remained steady, unreadable. "No," he said simply. The sheriff studied his face as if trying to decide whether he believed him. "Mind if I take a look around your property?" "Yes." The cowboy didn't move from the doorway. The sheriff chuckled a little, but it was the kind of laugh meant to hide irritation. "Well now, I'm not asking for fun. This girl's caused a bit of trouble. She belongs to folks who want her back." Belongs. The cowboy felt a slow burn in his chest at that word. "She belong anywhere?" the cowboy asked calmly, "or just to them?" The sheriff shifted his weight, clearly not expecting pushback. "Look, I don't make the rules. I just need to know if she came through here. We've got reason to think she might have passed this way." The cowboy didn't blink, didn't raise his voice, but his presence alone filled the doorway like a wall. "No girl here," he repeated. Behind him, the house stayed quiet except for the soft crackle from the stove. But from the back room, the girl was holding her breath, listening to every word with wide, shaking eyes. The sheriff leaned in a little, lowering his voice. "You sure? Someone said they saw footprints on the road leading toward your land, fresh ones." The cowboy didn't flinch. "Animals roam at night. Footprints ain't proof." The sheriff smiled again, but it looked more like a warning this time. "You know, folks in town say you keep to yourself too much. Hard to tell what goes on out here when a man's all alone." The cowboy's voice dropped lower. "I'm alone by choice." A silence stretched between them. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then, before the sheriff could say anything else, the cowboy added 6 words he had not planned, spoken with the steadiness of a man who had already decided what he would do if pushed. "If they ask, you're my wife now." He said it quietly, but the girl heard it clear as daylight through the thin door. Her hand flew to her mouth to keep from gasping. She didn't understand the meaning at first, not fully, but she knew enough to feel the shock ripple through her chest. The sheriff stopped smiling. "Your wife," he repeated slowly. You got married since when?" The cowboy's face didn't show a single crack of doubt. "Since last week." The sheriff studied him again, eyes narrowing. "Funny timing. Folks around here would have heard." "Didn't invite folks," the cowboy said. "Didn't need a celebration." The sheriff didn't know what to do with that answer. The cowboy's size alone made confrontation a last resort, and his calm, unwavering tone made the lie sound almost like truth. Sheriff Lomer glanced past him at the darkened interior of the house, but he couldn't see much. "Your wife home?" the sheriff asked. "She's sleepin'," the cowboy replied. "Long day, you won't wake her." The sheriff exhaled slowly. Suspicion still shone in his eyes, but so did caution. He wasn't eager to start trouble with a man who could lift a horse if he wanted to. "Well, if you see anything, you know where to find me," the sheriff said finally. The cowboy nodded once. Sheriff Lomer tapped his hat and stepped off the porch. The deputies turned their horses. The hoofbeats faded into the night again. Only when the sound disappeared completely did the cowboy close the door. He walked back toward the kitchen. The house was quiet again, but not empty. The door to the back room opened slowly. The girl stepped out, her eyes wide, breath trembling. Why did you say that?" she whispered. "Why did you tell him I'm your wife?" The cowboy looked at her with a steady calm she'd never seen in anyone. "To keep you safe," he said, and he meant it, every word. The girl stood in the doorway of the back room, still holding her breath like the danger hadn't actually left yet. Her knees looked weak, her hands shaking from fear and from the shock of what she had just heard. She stared at the cowboy, searching his face for any hint of regret or anger. But he looked the same as always, steady, quiet, impossible to read. "You lied for me," she said, her voice trembling. "Why? You didn't have to." The cowboy set the lamp back on the table and struck a match, letting a soft glow fill the room again. He took his time, as if giving her space to calm down without forcing anything. When the flame steadied, he finally answered. "They came lookin' for trouble," he said simply. "I ain't lettin' 'em take you." She shook her head. "But saying I'm your wife, that's not a small lie. What if they come back? What if they ask questions? What if they try to take me anyway?" "They ain't talkin' you," he repeated. "Not while you're under my roof. Under my roof." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had been running so long she had forgotten what it sounded like when someone claimed responsibility for her safety. Not ownership, not control, just protection. "But you don't even know who you're protecting," she whispered. "I could be lying, I could be the bad one." He didn't even blink. "Ain't seen a bad person look as scared as you." Her throat tightened. She turned away for a moment, trying to hide how close she was to breaking again. The cowboy didn't push her. He walked to the stove and poured the last bit of soup into a jar, setting it aside as if preparing for the next time she needed it. He moved with quiet confidence, like nothing about the sheriff's visit had shaken him. But it had shaken her. She walked slowly to the table and sat down again, clutching her hands together. "They won't stop," she said softly. "They'll come back. They'll ask around. They'll start watching you. I don't want that. You shouldn't get in trouble because of me." He sat opposite her, folding his arms loosely. "Trouble comes whether you ask for it or not, but I'll handle it." She looked at him again, really looked. Beneath the calm, beneath the heavy silence, there was something else. Strength, yes, but also a kind of loneliness she recognized too well. A loneliness so deep it had shaped him. "You've been alone a long time," she murmured. He didn't deny it. "Long enough." She swallowed, her voice growing soft. "I don't want to ruin that peace." His eyes lifted to hers. "Peace ain't worth much if you let bad folk walk over people who can't fight back." She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever defended her like that. No one had ever stood between her and danger without asking for something in return. She had grown used to kindness that came with a price. But this man, he didn't want anything from her. Not food, not money, not obedience, nothing, just to make sure she was safe. The wind outside brushed against the windows, making the glass hum. The girl flinched. The cowboy noticed instantly. "They scare you that bad?" he asked quietly. She nodded, tears gathering. "You don't know what they do to people who run. They break them. Not just with hitting, with words, with rules. They make you think you're worthless. They make you think you belong to them. And if you fight even once, they punish you in ways you don't forget." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. He let her talk because he could tell she needed to finally let the words out. "I tried to leave twice," she whispered. "They caught me both times. The second time, they didn't let me walk for 2 days because of how bad they beat me. I told myself I'd never try again." She looked up at him, eyes shining with fear and determination mixed together. "But I did. And you made it," he said. "Only because I ran into your barn," she replied, her voice breaking. He shook his head slightly. "You made it 'cause you didn't give up." She stared at her hands. Weak hands, small hands, hands that had clawed at locked doors and grabbed at the earth while being dragged away. Hands that had learned survival long before they learned comfort. "I'm tired of running," she said quietly. "But I'm scared of staying too." He nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected. "Fear ain't weakness. Means you've been through something real." She let out a shaky breath, the kind that comes right before tears. "If they take me back, I won't survive it this time." "You ain't going back," he said, firm in a way that felt unshakable. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly that it scared her even more. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people careless. Hope made people lose everything. "They'll come again," she whispered. "I know," he said. "They'll ask again. I know. They'll say things about me. I'll judge for myself. What if they threaten you?" He shrugged. "Let 'em try." His tone wasn't arrogant or loud. It was simply the voice of a man who had lived through enough storms to stop fearing the rain. The girl leaned back, exhausted. For the first time, she allowed her shoulders to drop slightly. Allowed herself one breath that didn't hurt, but the fear didn't leave. It rested in the corners of her mind like a shadow that refused to fade. "I'm not your wife," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "And I don't want to be a burden." "You ain't." She lifted her eyes again, searching for a lie, but he was too steady, too grounded to hide anything. "You're safe here," he said, his voice softer now. "And until trouble passes, I'll keep saying whatever I have to say to keep you safe." The girl closed her eyes, her breath trembling. For the first time since running, she wasn't alone. But danger hadn't gone away. It was circling, watching, waiting, and she knew it would return. The next morning came with a gray sky and a cold wind that crept through the cracks of the old ranch house. The girl barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the sheriff returning, imagined the faces of the people who had hurt her, imagined being dragged away. The cowboy, however, rose before dawn like he always did. The sound of him moving around the house, quiet but purposeful, pulled her from her restless thoughts. She stepped out of the back room, hugging her arms to her chest. He was standing by the window, watching the empty road that stretched toward town. His shoulders were broad and still, unmoving as stone. "Did they come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," he said, not turning away from the window. "Not yet." The words "not yet" made her stomach twist, but there was something reassuring about his calm tone. It was as if he had already prepared himself for whatever danger might return. He finally looked at her and nodded toward the table. "There's bread. Eat." She did as he said, though her hands shook as she tore small pieces from the loaf. She wasn't hungry, but she knew she needed strength if anything happened. The cowboy watched her quietly, then went back to watching the road. "Do you really think they'll come again?" she asked. He didn't need to think about it. "Yes," her throat tightened. "Then what are we going to do?" "First thing," he said, "is you stay inside today. Don't go near the windows, don't open the door if someone knocks." She nodded quickly. "I won't. I promise." He didn't smile, but there was something gentle in the way he looked at her, like he knew she needed reassurance more than orders. "You're safe as long as you're here," he repeated, the same promise from the night before. Time passed slowly. The cowboy worked outside for a while, mending a fence, checking the horses, while the girl peeked through the cracks in the shutters, trying to see him without making herself visible. Every sound made her heart beat faster. Every gust of wind made her flinch. She carried fear the way some people carried scars, constantly, unconsciously. Around midday, the cowboy came back inside. His boots thumped against the wooden floor as he walked to the sink to wash his hands. He studied her over his shoulder. "They were asking around in town," he said quietly, her breath caught. "You heard that?" "Old Mrs. Haven told me when I passed her place," he replied. "Says a group of men rode in this morning." Loud talkers, pushy, asking who's seen you. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. They won't stop until they find me. I know, he said, but they ain't findin' you here. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to his certainty. But fear had its own voice, whispering doubts she couldn't silence. As afternoon faded, the ranch grew quiet again. Too quiet. Even the horses seemed uneasy, their movements restless and short. The girl sat by the edge of the room, feeling the air thicken with tension. Then the cowboy suddenly tensed. He wasn't looking out the window. He wasn't listening for footsteps. He simply sensed something. A shift in the wind, a stillness in the air, something only a man who lived alone for years could detect. He moved to the window and glanced toward the horizon. The girl's breath hitched when she saw what he saw. 3 riders, coming slow, coming steady. Her heart hammered. "It's them," she whispered, backing away from the window. He didn't tell her to hide, not this time. Instead, he stepped toward the door, steady and huge like a wall ready to be moved only if he allowed it. "Stay behind me," he said. She did. Not because she trusted her legs to hold her up, but because she trusted his voice to guide her. The riders stopped several yards from the porch. She recognized them instantly, the same men who had dragged her back the last time she tried to escape. Their faces were cold, cruel, full of confidence. Their leader dismounted, brushing dust from his coat. "We're looking for a girl," the man said, stepping closer. "Small, scared, likes to run." His eyes narrowed. "She was seen heading this way." The cowboy didn't answer. His face remained blank, unreadable. The leader clicked his tongue. "Sheriff says you got yourself a new wife." He smiled, mocking. "Lucky man." The girl felt her knees weaken, but the cowboy didn't move an inch. "Wife's inside Restin," he said. "Ain't your concern." The leader laughed. "Oh, but it is. See, the girl we're looking for ran away from a place where she was Bane taken care of. She's confused, doesn't know what's good for her." His eyes shifted toward the house. "If she's in there, you hand her over now." The cowboy didn't blink. "She ain't here." The leader stepped closer, invading the cowboy's space. "You sure about that, big man? 'Cause if you're lying, that makes you part of her little crime." A long silence followed. The wind whipped across the dirt. The girl's breath came fast and shallow. Finally, the cowboy spoke. "She told me what you did to her." The man's smile cracked. "She lied." "She got the bruises," the cowboy said, "and the fear." "Fear don't lie." One of the other men spat on the ground. "She belongs to us." That was the moment the cowboy's expression changed, just slightly but enough. Something old and heavy awakened behind his eyes, something protective, something dangerous when pushed too far. He stepped forward, forcing the leader to take a step back. "She belongs to nobody," the cowboy said, voice low and final. The leader tried to hold his ground, but the cowboy's presence was too much. He signaled for the others to retreat slightly. "This ain't over," the man warned. "We'll be back." The cowboy watched them turn their horses and ride away, but he didn't relax. Not even after they vanished beyond the hill. Only when silence returned did the girl finally speak, her voice barely holding together. "They'll return," she whispered. "I know," he said. She looked at him, terrified. "What do we do now?" He turned toward her, steady and unwavering. "We stand our ground."